I'd like to call to order the Environmental Matters Committee meeting for September 19th. And we do a roll call. All of the members of the committee are present, yes, for the record.
I'm not here.
We're here.
So I entertain a motion regarding the minutes.
I move approval of the minutes.
I second that motion.
All those approved?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next up, jump right into Director Gutwald. You have an update for us?
Good afternoon, Pete Gutwald, Director of Planning and Zoning. Updates to plans that have forest conservation plans aren't many. I'll run through some of them. 39 Hudson, unless you have other questions, but 39 Hudson Street, we are now under building permit review for that development. Annapolis Public Library, we've issued the grading permits and the building permits for that project, so that will be starting construction very soon, if it hasn't already. I think some of the demolition's has started.
Pete, our form has a whole bunch of red for 107 Ford Street.
I'm hitting the ones that forest conservation, but I'll hit any one you want to that have forest conservation plans associated with them. That's my understanding, but if you want, that's a brand new project, redevelopment of that existing shingle building on Forbes Street.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So the library.
So the green.
Right.
If you want me to go through all the updates, I can.
No, you can proceed with
Okay.
going through the forest conservation, unless there's a special question on
Okay.
one of them.
Parkside Preserve, we've approved the grading permit for that. It has not been issued. I think we're awaiting bonds. Same thing with Rocky Gorge. The grading permit has been approved for that whole site now. And I don't think it's been issued yet, but it's been approved.
Is that any change from, I can't remember what the status was previously.
It's a change.
it's a
The
change.
grading permit was under review. It's now been approved.
Okay. And that's usually, which design is that for?
It's the original design, so it doesn't have the access to Ayers T. Allen. Everything's the same as was originally approved. The only thing that I understand is there might be the type of unit, maybe they're looking for tax credits to do affordable type workforce housing. But I don't know where that is. I mean,
Okay. Nothing else has changed with it?
no, in terms of the site.
And so you said that was approved?
It
Grading
was
permit
approved but not issued yet, as of September 1st, I should say. I didn't go back and look.
Okay.
But there's probably payments or bonds being waited to be submitted, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just sort of, okay, could you just elaborate? I can't believe that wasn't in the paper or anything. What exactly was approved for Parkside Preserve?
The
That's like a big
grading
deal.
permit.
Grading permit based
Yeah.
on what forest conservation, like, what is their data point as far as documents?
All the forest conservation site plans have been approved
Okay.
for a while. I mean,
Okay.
the forest conservation was approved in 2015, 16, somewhere along that lines.
Okay,
Went to the courts. The
okay.
court issued that it was not,
So they can start moving dirt,
yes,
okay,
Well, once they pick up the permit, yeah.
right.
okay.
But regarding that project, since it was mentioned, the forest that was protected, purchased from the developer.
Right, the 22 lots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just trying to get confirmation about whether or not, and I know there are going to be trails on that property, but are they going to be open to the public?
So they'll be owned by the homeowners association. They won't be necessarily public trails. The idea was, as you may be familiar with, is that was to connect to that road, but that road won't be there, and so there will be no trail to connect that. There was talk about trails that could connect it to either Quiet Waters Park and loop it back around. They're only building the trails that were identified in the plan. Since the road won't be connected, I believe Public Works is looking for some access to some of those, where the sewer, water and sewer systems coming through. There might be opportunities there, but right now, it's just it's the homeowners association trails associated with that
Well,
plan.
but we used public money to buy the forest.
So there's no trails on that portion of the property that we bought.
Okay, so
It
there
was
aren't gonna
supposed to be
trails.
public road up to that point where the trail would connect to the public road, but the trail stops.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'll have to take a look at the plan again. So it stops, it's dead end right now, correct?
yeah, but it's
I'm
way up
trying to
here
remember how.
where it dead ends. There was a road that came down and that brought in about 20-some lots right there. That's where the trail would have connected to that public road. It just kind of dead ends right there, so
Okay.
there's nothing between the two.
I'll talk more about it, I suppose, because if it's program open space money, there's a certain requirement about being available for the public. So,
That area of the property would be available to the public, so yeah, if there's something
but
that,
how are they gonna get to it?
we did not make the developer continue the road or build the road or
Yeah.
any of that. I mean, there's the right-of-way that's there, it's all platted. Remember, all that was done after the plats were recorded.
Right.
So we technically bought 22 lots and put an easement over top those lots. But the lots still exist.
Yeah. Have you checked the program open space requirements associated with that?
I'm not disagreeing with everything you're saying. The issue is whether the city wants to go in and put trails to connect them together, because the developer was not going to, so
Yeah.
he was building the road that would have connected the trail.
Okay.
So
Well-
maybe that's something that should come to finance. The city putting the I mean, first of all, I think it's a huge success, and I wanna thank you for your part in it, that we purchased that
Mhm.
open space. I think that's a great solution. But if we need to work on making the amenity better,
Yeah.
maybe we should consider doing that.
And
That's not
when
in
we
your-
did all that purchase, to your point, Rob, was a connection to
Mhm.
Quiet Waters Park itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm just trying to. My interest is just making sure that the public can.
Yeah,
Make
they
sure
have
they'll
the
have
right
access
to
to
use
that.
it. I mean, I'm not disagreeing that.
Yeah.
It's just whether it's the trail is, how the trail is connected with the rest. And to the point of the homeowners association restricting anybody, I guess they technically could, but I mean, it's not gonna prohibit people from walking through the trail system.
But those
but-
shotguns will.
Yeah,
They-
I mean,
they've
I don't-
tried before though. I think like before your time, I think they tried that at Acton's Landing, if I'm not mistaken,
yeah.
trying to keep people from accessing
Yeah,
the park.
that doesn't surprise me, right?
Goose
Um,
Park,
Yeah.
we can only keep
um,
the geese out.
All right. Well, I'll follow up more about that probably later.
Okay.
Just to get some confirmation.
Right. Tyler Heights?
I'm sorry?
Did you do Tyler Heights?
I did not. Tyler Heights, that should actually, I'm telling you, the grading permit was approved.
Yep.
It doesn't say that, it says under review, and the building permit is under review still, but I think the grading permit was issued like 2 days ago, 3 days ago, so, since this was updated. So, it's
Alright.
through the
Good to
woods.
Okay, you get out of here early.
Can I,
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
sorry, no, the Park Place, I know it wasn't green because it doesn't require forest.
Which one?
The Park Place Hotel, 139 rooms, that looks like,
Uh-huh.
that's in agency review?
Correct.
So where exactly, what property is that taking over? Are we in a?
You know
are
where
we
the
in a-
parking lot, where the gravel parking lot, where Public Works was storing, and there's employee parking there, and I think Public Works was using part of it, so it's over across the street from like the police station.
It's across from the police station, but it's not in the railroad right away, it's on the other
Nah,
side.
it's on the
Okay,
right,
Okay,
correct.
so it's not in my ward. Okay, it's Fred,
I
okay,
believe it's in Fred's.
yeah, okay. Wow, let's go in full speed ahead. Thanks.
Thanks,
Okay.
Director Otwell. Appreciate it. Next, we have update from Office of Environmental Policy.
Another reason why we don't need a hotel at City Hall.
I was gonna ask Brian Adams, our urban forester, to first give us an update on our G3 grant.
Yeah, so we did get all the paperwork turned in to accept the money to fund a conceptual plan for high-performance green infrastructure in downtown Annapolis. The focus of the grant was on Main Street and sort of coordinating with the mayor's plan to extend the sidewalk, and then also coordinating with the re-bricking of Main Street, which we're now 2 years out from, which would work well with the grant process. So right now, we're just at a conceptual level. We'll be looking, I'm putting together a scope of work, and we'll be looking at soliciting bids from some of the design firms to bring them in. We're going to have a series of community meetings for public input, and hope to have something finalized by the end of the year, early next year, and then apply for the actual engineering design portion of the grant.
So the,
It's a grant for street trees?
So it's green infrastructure in general. It doesn't limit us to street trees. One of the primary, one of my sort of primary goals was to get streets or trees on Main Street through the use of Silvacells, so that we're not taking up sidewalk space. So if the sidewalk were expanded and we were able to get some trees put in, the proper trees, you know, provide a shady place to sit along that very hot stretch of brick. And Silvacells would also, of course, if you're not familiar with them, they actually pull in runoff from Main Street. So they would actually filter and pull in runoff coming down Main Street, and storm water would flow into them. So they're not only, you know, beneficial as far as the trees go, but they're also a good BMP for stormwater management. There are other areas downtown that we would look at for things like bioswales or bioretention areas, or landscape buffers. You know, different ways. Really, the overall goal was to slow the stormwater flow down Main Street into the water. So it's a concept plan. We're going to be opening it up. You know, just sort of the bid will be just based on, you know, hours and community meetings, and then whichever firm is selected, we'll kind of go with, you know, give them blank slate and say, here's some of the things we were thinking about. What do you have in mind? Kind of take it from there.
so it also moves us forward at our urban tree canopy goals by planting trees on Main Street, and the idea of it's not like greening and it's stormwater retention and treatment, but it's also creating an aesthetically more pleasing environment, and business owners need to be educated as to the studies that exist that show that when you have a greener, shadier street, that people tend to linger longer. They go back in your store, they sit at your cafe, they have another drink. So we have to work on getting business owners buy-in. But again, as Brian pointed out, this is just at the conceptual design plan stage. The timing is good though, because of the plan to re-brick Main Street. I know that the Annapolis Environmental Commission is making a recommendation to the mayor's office that they consider permeable pavers. Again, we have to bring in historic preservation to make sure that permeable pavers are consistent with their vision and the standards for historic preservation. The Silvacells, that was initial, I already notified historic preservation staff that we are looking at this, because their initial reaction was, what is a Silvacell and what does it look like? Well, you can put anything you want over the top, and you can put exactly what we have now. So that takes care of that concern, but replacing the street pavers is another issue. But it's good timing, because it goes into the re-bricking, it ties into the mayor's plan for the expansion of the sidewalks, the bike lane, whatever he wants to do there, perhaps even closing it to a pedestrian walkway altogether. And this grant requires 3 public hearings, and so whatever conceptual plan, that we actually have something a drawing we can put up, several drawings, several different concepts we can share with the public and get their input, so they're part of the process. They don't feel like this is something that just happened. I attended the city council meeting last week, and heard all the testimony about bike lanes, so that was important to us, thinking about the scope of work for this project. And we'll sit down with the mayor's office and discuss both the results of the city council meeting and what we are thinking and ideas he has. He's already shared a few extra ones with me this past week. So it all comes together with this, and then, as Brian pointed out, this is just conceptual plans, and you could say revise it based on public input, scratch it all together, or we love it, one of these plans, we pick one and move forward for the next phase of funding for it.
Excellent. I did have a few questions. This is just for Main Street?
No.
No.
Well, it focused on Main Street, but it really is it's focused on downtown, historic downtown Annapolis. So we do have some leeway as far as our scope and where some of these BMPs could be placed.
But it has to incorporate green infrastructure, and in conversations I had with the trust right after we were awarded the grant, they emphasized they are looking to have trees on Main Street. They very much want to see that.
Good. Are you going to do a trial for the trees, a 30-day trial, put them in planters?
Yep.
Just.
We're
Fig trees.
5 different species for a week.
Yeah, that's right. See which ones.
Rotate them.
I think you should put all black walnut down there.
Yeah.
The cars.
We'd love that.
That'll get the cars off the Main Street. All right. And so is any of your proposal dependent on the bike lane getting put in? Doesn't matter if it goes in or not?
No, we could put that in the scope of work and say, bike lane with or without, and I'm sure that whoever we select will have ideas we haven't even thought of, They're in that business and
I
be much
think
more creative.
the trees should go in the bike lane and we can have a slalom.
There you go.
Yeah. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question first, just sort of engineering-wise, when I'm confused. I know that in the flood mitigation project that DPW is doing, they're going to be increasing stormwater piping below Main Street, sort of just trying to add redundancy, I guess, underground, okay? Is that your understanding, that they'll be doing some piping under Main Street for that project? Are you right? So that's my confusion.
Nope.
Is that as I'm very confused that there is this flood mitigation project, and I may be wrong. We would need David Jarrell here.
Yeah.
I mean, he has explained this project to us, but my understanding is that they were going to make some stormwater piping bigger below Main Street and collect
Okay.
stormwater below Main Street. But now, and so your concept of collecting, I just wanted to make sure the left hand and the right hand were
Right.
together here on, do their calculations assume your collection as well?
So I made sure that when we got this grant, that I talked to David Jarrell about it, because he'd not heard about this grant.
Oh, okay.
This was applied for before I assumed my position.
Sure,
And
okay.
so I was catching up to speed, but I did mention it to him. That's when I found out about the sidewalk expansion. So
Yeah.
we are all doing a better job now of interdepartmental communication. So Brian and I are working on a scope of work this week. We have to work with the mayor on that, but we need to touch base with Public Works and
Yeah.
Transportation as well, and make sure that we know about everything in the
Sure.
pipeline, and that it all feeds together,
Yeah.
so that we spend our money correctly on this type
Yeah.
of conceptual planning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, I'm sorry.
we had some initial conversation with Sam Bryce from DPW about how, if the Main Street bricking were to go forward before this plan would be implemented, how they would be able to maybe create inlets for the eventual installation of the Silva cells.
Okay,
But I guess David
Yeah.
didn't get the,
And if you'll be
hadn't
able
made
to
it.
hold on to your grant
Yeah.
funding until,
yeah.
What's that?
and if you'll be able to hold on to the grant funding until.
Well, we have to complete
happens.
this design by May, I believe. It had to be done within a year
Yeah.
period, but the grant did not come to us, and then we had to get it, then
Mm.
we had an appropriation for it, and then the city had to pass a resolution.
Yeah.
So, we know we can get a conceptual plan done by May. We just want to make sure we get all the right information to
Yeah.
our contractor
Well,
before they start.
sorry, did you have any? I really appreciate the fact that you are talking to HPC. I know I'm beating a drum here, but, I think the project, I mean, we talk about a bike lane, but I think inevitably we're talking about two different things. I mean, one, you know, the mayor could get rid of the bike lane and then still have these sidewalk expansions. But what concerns me is that, and I think you answered this, is that I would not want your scope of work contingent on the sidewalk extensions, because I'm not sure if, I would feel better if there was a pre-app with HPC about these sidewalk extensions. I don't know why, you know, that can't be done. I mean, just talk to them and say, look, because, right?
Right, but I think Brian has said this is in concept.
Yeah, but I mean, before you do public
I think
hearings.
trees on Main Street, with or without parking. With parking, there's door knocking that could happen into the trees, but it's a concept, and I applaud you for the concept.
Oh,
And
absolutely,
I think having
yeah.
the public hearings, we must do that.
Yeah, I will say that the concept was based on the extension of the sidewalk. Because without it, like you said, with parking there now, there's not much room for trees. You'd be squeezing something in and it wouldn't really work. It had to do with if that side of the street works, the sidewalk were extended out, would provide room for the silvacells and the trees and still lots of pedestrians, walkway, space.
And
you
we
know.
can hang bistro tables and
Right.
chairs off the tree.
You know, downtown is just, the urban heat island effect is unbearable in the
Yeah.
summer, and it'd be nice to find a way to get some more green and some trees downtown.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for your efforts.
Okay. Racine Hodo is our environmental program coordinator. She was going to speak to our Maryland Energy Administration grant.
Good afternoon,
Which
committee members.
I think is, that's fine. I just want so my colleagues know, I think that's on the agenda
What is that?
as well.
She was going to provide an update on where we stand with it.
Is that related to the agenda item, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so we applied for and received, well, we have not received the funds yet, but we were chosen for grant funding through the Maryland Energy Administration. As part of the grant funding, they asked that we pass resolutions, it didn't have to be a resolution, it could have been an executive order or something like that, but that the city has goals of reducing energy or reducing energy efficiency by 15% over 5 years. And then also that the city-owned buildings over 5 years will ultimately receive at least 20% renewal. I may be messing this up. 20% more renewable energy and energy efficiency for 15%. All of this over 5 years. Jackie worked very hard on getting these resolutions passed. And it was passed by the city council that we have these goals. Also, there's a project associated with the grant funding, and and it has to do with energy efficiency, the project. So what we're looking at is potentially changing the police garage lights to LEDs, to also the GOTS garage, I understand it's been changed over to LEDs except the top floor. So we would change that lighting out. And then we have 25 pump stations throughout the city, and we would change that to LED lighting. The project has not yet been approved. I have to submit it for approval by October 1st, and I'm working very hard on doing some calculations right now on energy used, energy that might be saved, and over the 5-year period of time. But it is $55,000, and it moves the city further ahead in its energy efficiency.
Do we get
Okay.
credit from the solar energy park use that
The
the city does?
The solar energy park startup was absolutely perfect timing because we have to show a baseline year showing what our energy usage was, and then over time show the savings or the reductions over time. So we have the baseline information, and the energy park just went up, and we've got 5 years
Right.
to meet this goal of the buildings having 20% renewable energy usage.
Yeah, it seems like you won't have any problem, the city won't have any problem meeting those goals because of the renewable energy park for the most part. That's 15% is, because I think it's providing, I forget, anybody recall how much energy the renewable energy park's going to be providing for the city?
The park is generating 12 megawatts. The city, I heard 2 numbers. The city is either taking 3 megawatts or 4 megawatts. It's about 20 or 25% of what they're generating. And then there are other entities that the
County and the school board.
energy is going to go, yeah.
Did you remember how much we use in energy every year, megawatts?
I don't have that information.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
But we do have that information, we just don't have it
Yeah.
right here at our fingertips.
Okay.
And what was the other question? Oh, has anybody looked at Park Place? Do you know Park Place Garage? I remember Park Place Garage being
Yeah.
really high energy user. I don't know if they have LEDs or not.
Is it owned by the city?
What is
It's
the
a-
relationship with that? We have an
I
ownership
don't-
interest.
I don't see
It's
it
a joint
list-
interest, but we end up paying all the electricity from our
Okay.
home.
Okay, I will check into that.
Yeah,
They were-
Teresa mentioned that to me today, that we have an ownership interest, but she
Yeah.
wasn't sure exactly what it was.
We
Uh,
issued TIFs, and as a result, we get 600 spaces or
Oh, okay.
some
Something like
large
that,
number of
yeah.
parking spaces there.
Okay, I'll check into that because it actually, it could be approved as part of the project that we perform, because the garage is underground, those lights are on all the time,
Right.
24/7. And so if we change out the lighting to LED lighting, we could show a payback in a very short period of time, and that's really something that they're looking for. I mean, they're definitely looking for a payback, but they'd rather it over a shorter period of time rather than a longer period of time.
And then how does this relate to the performance energy contract? And that presumably will help us meet our goals as well, right?
I'm not familiar with the performance energy
It's a
contract.
$5 million program with Honeywell
Yeah.
that
Oh,
is kind of
yeah.
in a bust.
You know what they did in 2016? They did audits of all of our city-owned properties and buildings. And within this audit, they also listed several energy conservation measures that would save the city money. David Gerald in Public Works has worked very hard and well to actually, anything that came out of that Honeywell report that was cost savings to the city has been done to the city-owned properties.
So I think there were a lot of lights replaced, and there was some HVAC systems that went to energy efficient units.
Yeah.
That was part of that Honeywell money.
Yeah, maybe we should ask for an update at some point.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
there were a few buildings exempted from that.
Well, like 145 Gorman is exempted because it's a leased building, although we pay the electric. It's a leased building and not owned by the city, so it wasn't included in the audit. And thus also not included as part of this grant. But one of the things that has come out of this is that because of the work that Honeywell has done, the city is pretty well situated with our energy efficiency. We are really, I've talked to the folks over at Maryland Energy Administration, and they say that we're leaps and bounds ahead of many other communities when it comes to energy efficiency.
What's our interface with BG&E on anything like this, or is there any interface with them?
The city streets, this is the only thing that I know that where BG&E is playing a role. The city street lights
Yeah.
have not been switched out to more efficient lighting. And that was something also that came out of the Honeywell project audit. But Donovan Harold is working with BG&E on that project. When it's going to take place, I don't know. But it's my understanding that BG&E is actually paying for all of that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The one area where we're not being very energy efficient is that we don't have any electric charging stations in any of our garages.
Right.
So this has been brought up to me by many groups, and I was actually contacted by a group that receives some state funding. And what they provide is about 40% of the cost of of a electric charging station. So that's 40% of the cost and installation. We would have to come up with the rest of the money. At the time I informed them it was not in our budget, but that I would have to pursue grant funding for that. So I spoke to the city manager about it today, and because I'm getting more and more inquiries about charging stations, and she gave me the green light to go ahead and pursue grant funding. So we would be looking at Hillman, Gotts, Knighton, and Park Place we needed to think about because of the different relationship there. But those would all be places we could think about putting in charging stations depending on the amount of grant funding that we might receive. And we have a person who's new to the Annapolis Environmental Commission. Name escapes me at the minute. She hasn't been approved yet, but she's someone who has experience with energy efficiency and renewables and getting electric car stations put in. She did some same sort of work in Maine. So she's someone I could definitely tap into for that resource, as well as Annapolis Green has a lot of connections in that area.
Yeah.
And
Can we, on that topic, first of all, the electric car owners have a range of about 250 miles, so they plan their travel to where they can get charges.
Right.
So
It's a good point.
One of the inns in Eastport got 3 free charging stations from Tesla. Tesla will do it
Okay.
for free.
right?
And there are obviously designed for Tesla vehicles, but also there's a converter that you can use for any electric vehicle. So they were installed at what's the name of the bed and breakfast? It's Corey Bonnie's. I can't think of the Horn Point Inn. The 3, and we had a big ceremony, and there were a whole bunch of Tesla drivers, and those are neat cars. That were there. I think 20 drivers came from all around the area to be there for the ribbon cutting. So we can get the industry, I think, and not necessarily just grants, but the industry to come in and do it for us. We have to figure out who's going to pay for the electricity.
Well, that was the point the city manager raised with me, is that the grant funding we would have to pursue, because she said it's not in the budget,
Right.
would be for not only the unit and the installation, maintenance, and the electricity use.
I think we need to think out of the garage, so to speak.
Yep.
Because people have to pay to get into the garage to
Exactly.
get the charge. So Corey's station is just in his backyard. There's 3 charging stations. I'd encourage you to go look at it. It's down on 100 block of First and Chesapeake, in his backyard.
Who is this?
Corey Bonnie, Horn Point Inn.
Okay.
And I can help you get the contact
Okay.
information, but it's good for his business, and it would be good for the business of City of Annapolis, because if people plan their trips on where they can get their next charge,
Right.
so the more we can do this, and even outside of the garages, as I said, we might be able to get some of the businesses. Maybe Maryland Avenue businesses might want a charging station in front of them to get more people to come over to Maryland Avenue.
Well, you may be aware that the City of New York piloted a program where you have to upgrade the voltage on your lamppost, but you can plug right into a lamppost
Yeah.
and charge. So
Good.
that might be an option for West Street or Maryland Avenue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
At the street end parks.
Street end parks,
Yeah.
right. And also, we also own some parking lots, of course, not
Yeah,
just garages.
right.
For example, the one right behind the visitor center, I don't know what the name of that one is, but that's Larkin Lot. There's some other
Right.
lots which would be perfect areas to put them in as well.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions on electric cars? No?
Well, I think this is important, especially, you know, we're gonna be getting a number of new police vehicles in the future. Apparently, I don't know if they're gonna have to adhere to our clean vehicle, the actual law we have in place,
Right,
because there's kind of, it wasn't worded very well. But, you know, was it Hyattsville?
City of Hyattsville, they have a
They have-
motorcycle and a police, the
Police
police
have-
chief
yeah.
drives a electric car,
Yeah.
right? I did point out again to the city manager today that we have, in the code, that requirement that we convert over to renewable energy, natural gas, and, electric would be more fitting now because that was written some time ago. In fact,
Yeah.
it says that we're supposed to be in compliance with a certain percentage by 2009, so we sort of
Yeah.
missed that date. And
Oh.
now electric cars
We
are.
got extensions.
Yeah, so electric cars would be the route to pursue, I think, in the charging stations, but I pointed that out to her, when we're doing replacement, we should be purchasing electric cars per
Mhm.
code. So I just want to touch upon a couple other things, and if there are other questions on other matters that we have pending, I'll be happy to answer those questions. Under conservation, we are pursuing a piece of property, the Schubert property was given to the city. It was a gift, and there is a storm restoration project that we have proposed to do on that property, and we're submitting a grant proposal to the Chesapeake Bay Trust next week for funds to pursue that project.
Which is the property?
It's the Schubert property, and where's it located, Racine?
It's located sort of behind the police station, Brewer Avenue, Woodlawn Avenue, Beach Street, in that area there. I'm not sure how to tell you how to get there, but if you were to go around the Spa Circle, you'd be making a right turn into the neighborhood just shortly after you go around the circle.
It's behind Pinky's.
Oh, all right, well.
But yeah, it's like the headwaters for
College
College
Creek.
College Creek. So it makes a
College
lot
Creek.
of sense to do a project right at the headwaters, and focus, that's what I prefer to do that, and work down later. And this was conveyed to the,
Yes.
city.
gonna become
Also,
part of our existing conservation easement over there.
I think that's, there is a conservation easement on
Yeah,
it.
We have a couple of existing around prior to that, because that's something that, you know, the Conservancy Board's been working on for.
so,
almost 10
just
years
to
now.
also let you know, there's an outfall, located right there
Okay.
where the stream picks up. So there's a great deal of erosion that is present currently, and that's what we would be addressing, as well as, you know, restoring the stream and making it, set up to better handle stormwater.
Another conservation-related issue we've just encountered is that there's an easement in the Kingsport neighborhood that allows access for the residents to reach Crab Cove, and they drive cars down there and unload and walk down a pathway. But there's an overlying driveway easement that goes to the water to a residence. This easement's been in place since 2002. But apparently there's been some problems with people parking on the road, and that was worked out in the past. But now the owner of the property with the driveway easement has put up a fence. It's a low fence with like a rope kind of looped between, but there is a chain link across one part of it, and they have the only lock and key on it. So they're in violation of their easement, their conservation easement. The residents of Kingsport can still walk around the fence to get to the pier and to the water, but they cannot bring on maintenance equipment to the property. And they also, the South River Federation is going to do a stormwater pond outfall restoration project on the other side of the easement and near the neighborhood, and they will not be able to get in any vehicles or equipment that will be needed for that. So this has already been referred to the Annapolis Conservancy Board, and they're making a recommendation to the Office of Law. The Kingsport neighborhood is represented by lawyers who are contesting the violation of the easement, and the Office of Law will be at the Building Board of Appeals hearing next week. And then another easement issue that was brought to my attention, I think that we should look into, is that that Truxton Park should be considered for conservation easement. It's a good point. It's great waterfront property on
Yeah.
Spa Creek, and city could always sell it if it decides it needs to raise money, so I think this is something that we should look into and pursue. I don't know if you have any thoughts from this committee on that.
Yeah, because it's actually, you're clairvoyant, because there have been requests from Spa View residents doing construction to, this is resolved with Beth Bellis, and she got a letter from DNR that they want to, stockpile their material there. They use that property for their own, and it would set a terrible precedence, but to have that is just more protection. That would be good.
Right.
We
Yeah, there
actually
are-
met with the State Critical Area Commission this week. We're working on an MOU with them in order to spend critical area fee in lieu money that we've been collecting from developers. Typically, we're limited to only spending it for replanting projects in the 100-foot buffer, and we are working on an MOU with them to expand that use to things like a boundary survey for, a conservation easement along the water or other water quality improvement projects.
Yeah, good. And related to the easement, another property is the Waterworks Park.
Oh, yeah, that's
It's in the county, but it's city-owned, and I don't believe there's any kind of conservation easement on that. Not that anybody would be able to build on it, probably, but you never know.
You never know. And let's see. Oh, related to Truxton Park too, is they have, Racine and I just, was it yesterday? No. 2 days ago, we walked the trails with Marissa Whitlinger, and they have a real erosion problem over there with the slope is eroding drastically. There are
In
people.
Truxton, you said?
And Truxton
Yeah.
along Spa Creek. The people that are fishing along on the lower edge, and then above that, there's people that use a walking, running, bike trail. It's significant erosion. They've tried to do some Band-Aid fixes over the past, but we're talking over $1 million worth of restoration work. So they've been, it's been kind of tough for them to go after grant funding, although I think my thoughts were perhaps we look at it in pieces. Rather than trying to go for $1 million+ grant, we do it in pieces. And there's water runoff that starts up at the ball fields. We could look, there's been, someone did an estimate on that at one time. We have that estimate still. I think it was done in 2017. And then I noticed some pieces up there where we could do small restoration projects right at the top. But then as we are walking the trails, there's something, it's a point lookout or lookout point. I don't know if you're familiar with that point. You look straight up Spa Creek from there,
Yeah.
and there's a marker there, and and there's also a memorial bench in front of it. And it's kind of on the point where it's eroding quite a bit. It's very steep there, and there's a very large tree in front of it. So if those roots start being compromised and that all falls down, then the memorial goes with it as well as the marker. So I think that's a point you can rally around, because we already have done work there, and that was considered important enough to put some markers there. So looking at it in batches, that's one thought I had, is to approach it that way. But it's something that's pretty daunting cost-wise, but really falling apart in Parks and Recreation. They don't have the funds to address it.
Excellent.
Let's
Any
see.
other questions? Nope. Okay. Well,
Okay.
Thank you. It's very nice to be getting these updates from the.
I feel the synergy.
Good.
But you might as well stay put. We could jump up to the R4318,
Yeah.
and in case we have questions.
Yeah.
So we've already talked about this, so I don't know how many. Do any of my colleagues have questions about this resolution?
I move we recommend approval.
Yeah, you can make that motion. Okay.
Is that a second?
Yeah, was that a motion?
Yes.
I second that motion to approve our 4318.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're quick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We know when something's good.
Now the
O22.
Thank you. The final item on the agenda is O2218, which is the food handling establishments, polystyrene food services products prohibition. So, all right, trying to think where to start with this. So, the county bill, which was this was modeled off of originally, as we know, was vetoed, did not pass, and so I think we need to revisit some of the recommendations from our last committee meeting, and they're on the agenda. Let's see. So, particularly, last time we recommended amendment number 2, which was essentially striking the entire piece of legislation and substituting, basically just referencing the county provisions. Since there are no county provisions, we kind of
Have to go back.
can't do that. So, amendment 2. So, is there a motion to perhaps, I don't know how to phrase it,
Remove and
Replace.
replace.
rescind our recommendation for
Right.
amendment 2?
Well, we certainly have to fix it because
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we
So-
need to rephrase.
I would make a motion that we withdraw recommendation number 2 from the Environmental Matters Committee.
I second that,
Okay.
based on the county rejection,
Yeah.
yeah.
All those in favor?
All right?
Aye.
Now, regarding the other amendments, let's see. Amendment 1 struck a provision, it removed providing certain definitions and providing for penalty for violations. I think we may also need to strike number 1, because if we go forward with our own ordinance, it'll have to have a penalty attached to it, because the county, when I spoke with the health department at the housing committee, they said that they're willing to enforce this apply this provision, I should say, which they apparently do with the city on other things. But in terms of they'll notify us when there's a violation, but we are actually the entity that will have to issue the fines and violations. So that means we'll have to presumably have an accompanying resolution that sets the fines.
So county doesn't fine even though they inspect?
Right. So originally, if we were going to piggyback on the county would probably just handle it all in-house internally. But in this case,
Actually, probably the third one too, right?
the
Because
third
that
one
was-
we should probably talk about. The third one extends the effective date. In the legislation, it was September 1st, 2019, and the county extended theirs to January 1st, 2020, and we were just, I think, doing that to go along with the county. So, we could also revisit that.
So
And just,
it would seem to me that we should rescind all 3 of the Environmental Matter Committee recommendations for amendments and stay with the legislation as originally submitted. So I would make that motion.
Yeah, that's what we did yesterday, in Health and Human,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay, is that on the floor?
Yeah.
As a motion? I second that motion to rescind these amendments and go back to the original.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, I do have some other amendments, and I can give you the draft summary. Yeah, I was hoping, I was hoping the law office would, they unfortunately ran out of time to get these to me in final format, but I think it'd be worthwhile to go over some of these. In the meantime, we can clarify what kind of information we'd like from the law office, and I also want to see what both of you think about some of these amendments. So first of all, the First Amendment would, and this is going off of the original legislation, would insert a letter C, which would be, so it would say a person shall not sell or offer for sale in the city an expanded polystyrene food service product. And the explanation behind that is the Prince George's and Montgomery County ban, as well as the Anne Arundel County original bill, all banned the sale of EPS food service products, but not by food service businesses, but not by other businesses. So the Annapolis bill does not ban the sale of EPS food service products at all, only the sale and provision if
So-
that makes sense.
This would insert a new C and then make the current C a D?
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, when I read it, it seemed reasonable.
Yeah.
Confused, when would that apply? When would a person just sell the polystyrene?
So this means that they wouldn't be able to sell, for example, styrofoam, or, sorry, EPS, plates or cups
Okay,
for
or takeout or whatever, I
some,
mean,
yeah, for takeout
or
or
some kind
anything
of-
from, picnics.
picnics or something, I
Yeah,
got you,
associated
okay.
food. And that was the intention of the Anne Arundel bill and the Prince George's Montgomery, but it somehow just didn't make it over into ours. So this would just amend that.
Okay?
So that's number one. Amendment number two, it just removes a couple of mays and puts shall in there.
Right, and that's the preferred language from the Office of Law.
Yeah. So, page 2, line 17. I don't know, Taki, if you need me to read through these out loud for the record, or? Okay. So amendment number 2 would be on page 2, line 17, a food service business may, and so would insert shall, not sell or provide food in expanded polystyrene food service products. And then page 2, line 19, this section may, change that to shall, not apply to food or beverages filled and sealed in expanded polystyrene containers outside of the city prior to receipt. So nothing too substantial there.
So do you want motions on these two amendments?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I would move favorably, or I would move to support amendments number 1 and number 2.
But I would, it's subject to a law review, legal review of 2?
well,
Or-
some of these are gonna have
They have to go
legal,
through?
Two
legal
comes
review.
from law.
Hmm?
2 is just a,
Law is the ones that said change all mays to shall.
Right, oh, they said that already, or did you?
That's their general rule.
Oh, okay.
So we've
okay.
run into this with other
Okay,
legislation.
so I don't have to say subject to law review?
No.
So, okay, I second the motion to,
Approve number 1 and number
approve
2.
number,
Go through all of them first, and then, or do you want to do them separately?
Well, I just thought
two
we
at a
should-
time.
We should have been doing it, we should have been doing it as we go along, but,
okay. Yeah, we'll do them separate.
yeah.
So, okay,
Aye.
there's been a motion, all those in favor?
Aye. Okay, so we've
Aye.
now approved amendments 1 and 2.
Yeah, so 1 and 2 have been approved.
As recommendations to the council.
Right. Amendment number 3 is, this is one that may need to go to the law office because, this just has to do with, we'll have to have
Right.
create our own, a company, a sister resolution setting the actual fines. But the one thing we could talk about would be what amount we would like to tell the law office we'd like
Right.
them to write up.
So on
and-
number 3, what we need is to create a resolution,
Mhm.
because the fines are all done by resolution, and then you're
Right.
right, we need to discuss what the fines are.
So what I put here is just what was in, apparently the Prince George's County law bill is what's being used, and that's what was used to model this proposed state ban. And so, and I guess apparently Baltimore City has even more aggressive fines, but I just chose the Prince George's County. It's 200, it's actually, first it's just a warning, and then second violation is $250 fine, and then anything beyond that's $1,000.
Is it clear, I don't see it in the ordinance, but, or do we have agreement in that little, kind of, not confusion, but that they will inspect and somehow get back to the city on the violations? Is that written anywhere, or is that understood? Do you know what I'm saying? Is that something that needs to be spelled out?
Do they issue a citation when they inspect and find a violation?
No, my understanding was that they would only notify us of the violation, and we would need to
We would need to
they
actually
write the
do that,
citation.
don't they do that now with, when they shut down a restaurant for you
Food
know,
safety.
food, yeah, like health reasons. Somehow there has to be some communication with the city. I don't know what it is. I don't know, that if we have to connect the dots there or not. That's my only concern, so
Well, so your
maybe
point
that's in the resolution, I don't know.
is this would have to go to Office of Law, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be done in the ordinance, it would be done as an accompanying resolution
Right.
to the fine, so. I like the warning, first, and then a smaller fine, and then after that, it's clear they're not intending to comply, so
Mhm.
make it punitive.
So do we want to, I guess just be on the record in terms of this is what we're requesting from the law office?
Right.
I mean, they're going to be best able to determine the wording.
Yeah, you need to somehow address the whole fine processing through.
Okay, so we'll ask them to go forward. Are you okay with 250, the warning, and then 250 and 1,000? Okay. Sensing agreement on that, we'll make note of that. Amendment number 4, removed serviceware from the definition of food service products on page 2, line 4. Because serviceware is not defined in our ordinance, and it's included in the Montgomery County bill, for example. But the point is, my intention wasn't to have this ordinance include straws or forks or plastic spoons. It was to focus on the EPS. So I'd like to propose removing that so we don't have to crack down on the straws and utensils. Because the utensils are not, and the straws are not recyclable either. And I've been speaking with Annapolis Green, and they are going to be doing an education campaign around straws.
Oh, okay, so we're not there yet, is what you're saying,
Yeah, I know, I kind of don't want to throw too much into this.
I just saw a look on Ross's face, like.
What do you
Well,
think?
I mean, I'll go along because we need to do this in steps, but a lot of the restaurants are voluntarily either not giving out straws, only give them if requested, and/or like the Market House gives you paper straws,
Mhm.
which tend to pretty much be gone by the time you're through using them, but
Yeah.
so yeah, that's fine, we can separate it into smaller steps. I agree with, I would move that we recommend this amendment to the legislation.
I just want to say one thing. My first reaction to that is, I'm not in the restaurant business, but how are these supplied? In other words, do they get the utensils with the plates, and so it would make sense to try to get that as a package. But if Annapolis Green, if you've talked to them, who supply everything compostable, if they want to do the steps, then I agree. Is there a motion on the floor that I just interrupted?
Well, let me also say,
Well, just
if
second
you,
it and then we can discuss it.
okay, you did, second it?
I second that.
So I do want to add, I mean, we do have people here who I believe are represent some of the industry, restaurant, retail, but also folks who represent Trash Free Maryland and Sierra Club. So if the committee does have any specific questions for them, like you can feel free to ask them.
Sure.
I don't necessarily want to have back and forth of public comment, but if you do have specific questions, then please.
So
please do.
should we finish the amendments though?
Yeah, so there's been a second. All those in favor of Amendment 4?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Amendment 4 is recommended favorably. Amendment 5?
I motion that we approve Amendment 5.
Second. But how does it fit?
Well, for
that
the,
would be, they're not gonna, the county's not gonna be inspecting for this, are they? They
No,
would be only
that's,
inspecting restaurants.
Right.
I would
So-
almost think this wants to be its own, but I don't know how do you enforce peanuts? The packing peanuts?
Yeah, well, there are probably only a few places that sell them. Is Office Depot in the city or county?
Is the one
County? But
Yeah, right, the one
the
on.
UPS store, I've been told UPS has already shifted to starch-based peanuts, so it's a moot point for them. I don't know, anybody in the audience knows any place else where they may sell these packing peanuts. So the proposal for Amendment 5 is to add a definition, essentially group into this a ban on a prohibition on the sale of what's commonly referred to as packing peanuts
My sense is,
that are made from EPS.
yeah, I don't think,
Bags
I
of
don't
them.
think,
If anybody has information on, you're welcome to come up to the podium and comment on that. Please come up so you're on the record on the microphone.
see, I think this should be a separate piece of
Yeah,
legislation. I don't think it's consistent with all of the food places. And I'm not sure we can, I don't know what, certainly can't have power over the post office. And I wonder how many packing places there are in the city. I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe Free Press or the
I'm not
the
sure.
guy that sends Free Presses spaces in, Post
Is
Haste.
there still a place in Eastport that will mail in
No.
in the shopping center? No.
So-
Well, I don't, maybe there is in the shopping center. It's not. Tracy Voorhees has gone from 4th Street. But Post Haste does mail things. I don't know whether they use peanuts or not. So I
Yeah.
think we need a little more exploration on this one.
Okay.
I agree, just one thing to add, I mean, if we did, we would have to change the base ordinance to read other than food handling establishments, because the ordinance's title is food handling
Yeah,
establishments.
I think we should do it separately.
Okay. Well, if you have anything you'd like to say, please just state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Mike Levy, and I'm with the Plastics Food Service Packaging Group, which is part of American.
Just make sure the green light's on.
Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Levy. We've testified on record before on the ordinance, but I'm with the American Chemistry Council, the Plastics Food Service Packaging Group. As far as I say, we've commented on the ordinance. Our position is still the same. A couple of things that I like to address is in particular, the health and safety study. I think it's titled polystyrene, but it really focused on styrene. And there's a difference between styrene, which is a liquid that is a raw material, and then polystyrene, which is the product. And what's significant about that, yesterday and today, I think we heard a lot about, all the health effects of styrene. The 5 agencies that have studied styrene, which includes the FDA and the National Toxicology Program, the National Institute of Health, and American Cancer Society, have all determined that when it comes to polystyrene, that there's no health effects at all. The amount of styrene in polystyrene is small to begin with, and in particular FDA, which regulates food service for the last 50 years, they've determined that about, I think it's something like 6.6 micrograms per person is the intake, and 90,000 micrograms per person is the safety level. So I just want to make the point that, again, styrene is a liquid. Styrene has nothing to do with the polystyrene product.
Do you have any information on the packing peanuts that you
Yes, I
ordered?
do.
Okay.
The EPS packaging, well, this ordinance is really around what we call polystyrene foam, which is expanded polystyrene foam food service products. The packing peanuts are made also from expanded polystyrene foam. They're actually called loose fill, but they are peanuts. So those are slightly different process, but it is expanded polystyrene foam. Those are usually manufactured and distributed and then collected through, kind of a reuse type of thing. There are starch-based peanuts that are also out there that are made of other materials. So they wouldn't be, they might be different colored materials and things like that. So those are alternatives, of course, to the packing peanuts. And then you've probably seen the air cushion things as other alternatives and corrugated. But the peanuts themselves are expanded polystyrene foam. And as I say, there are actually programs, I think it's mailboxes and others to collect them up. So So if you were to look at EPS, they, for instance, are recycled the same way. You could collect those and grind them up and make them into the materials.
Okay.
Well, but the city expressly says that they will not recycle. So, the expanded polystyrene and the peanuts, you can't put in our recycling bins because our recycler won't accept that for recycling.
Right.
So that just goes to the landfill, so that's something we'd have to work on to.
Yeah, I think the other
City
issue that, excuse me, the other issue you may have is, if you think about it, it's kind of the same issue as stuff that's manufactured outside and brought in. Typically, the peanuts are used for packing materials, so all your computers and things like that, you know, that are manufactured somewhere else would be shipped in here. So if you were to regulate them, it would either have to be kind of, the origin would have to be here because of interstate commerce and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why, like Dell and all of these places have programs to take back the peanuts and then to recover them or reuse them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the information.
Okay. And I just had one other thing to add.
Is it about the packing peanuts?
It's about the marine debris issue, which I think I heard yesterday and today. I mean, which is one of the basis for the ban.
Well, I'd like to,
Okay.
I want to focus right now on
On the
the
peanuts?
amendment that we're talking about. I know.
Okay, that's fine.
Is there any other, I'll take one more person to talk about, if you have any comments about the peanuts, packing peanuts.
There is an organization that represents all the manufacturers of the peanuts, and they collect all this, so we can
Thank you,
provide
sir.
it.
Please just state your name
Yes.
for the record.
Good afternoon, I'm Martha Ainsworth, and I'm in the,
Is the mic on?
yeah,
Right? Okay. good.
sorry, I'll speak louder. I'm Martha Ainsworth, and I'm on the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club Zero Waste Committee. I'm the chair of the Prince George's County Sierra Club, where we have our own foam ban in Prince George's County. You were asking about the enforcement. So in Prince George's and Montgomery, the public health people do report things, but they also, and this isn't written in the bill, in either bill, but there's a line that there's complaint-driven enforcement. In other words, I can call a line and say, I was just over at such and such place and they had packing peanuts. And then that triggers someone to go and look for it. But it's not actually spelled out in either
Right.
bill. That's just the way the Department of Environment in both places, you know, made it possible for citizens to call in for people that are violating it.
So that's
Okay.
good to know.
Yeah.
My sense, and I'm one vote, is that we address this as a separate issue. I think we got some good information. I think hearing that there are organizations that will take these packing materials back. I just sent off a bunch of foam from our television set to our junkyard. I didn't know that I could, and I don't know, and I don't understand why our recycling company can't let us send those things, and they send them off to these other people to reprocess. But I think this is an important enough but a different enough idea that really needs its own legislation, not complement the restaurant legislation.
Was it a part of, or is it a part of the Prince George's County?
In Montgomery bills, it is. What's interesting is that it's underneath, their foam ban bills are underneath an environmental or a waste title of their code. And you don't have an environmental title in your city code.
We need somebody to work on that.
But you have a food service title. So,
Right.
you know, one could raise that issue is how is it related to food? But, you know, I think my own casual observation, although we could easily do a survey in Annapolis and figure out if anyone's actually still using EPS peanuts, because there's been a lot of transition to other materials, bubble wrap, those little air pillows, and the biodegradable ones. But because they're so bad for the environment, they're already in little pieces. If they fall out of something, they just blow right into the rivers, and
Right.
they go away really fast. So,
Yeah.
but it's totally understandable
Well, since
what you want to
Since
do.
this is probably gonna have to, come back to the committee in some fashion once the law office gets, some of these other things addressed, maybe if anybody does have research, about local businesses that, may use EPS peanuts, I think that'd be good to know. There's no reason for us to put it in here if nobody's really using it. But I also would like information about, if anybody recycles and accepts these. My understanding was, I know there's one place that accepts EPS foam for recycling in Crofton, but it was my impression that they don't accept packing peanuts. They accept the wholesale packaging, the big chunks of the foam, but not necessarily the peanuts.
And that's correct.
if-
The Sierra Club went to all of the drop-off places in Maryland and took pictures, and none of them accept packing peanuts in their drop-off. It's generally these large chunks of foam, and there is one in Crofton, right next to the, right kind of to the south of the post office in Crofton, that will take these big chunks from your television set next time, but they also have a label that says they don't accept food containers either.
Okay. Well, if anybody has information to the contrary, please feel free to send it to the committee. And if you have any information about who may use this locally, I'd be happy to see that
I'll
as well.
volunteer somebody from from Annapolis for doing that. Thank you.
Sorry, Alderwoman Tierney,
I
did
just
you
wanted to
comment?
say thank you for being here. Thank you.
I wasn't.
I think we have to revisit number 5, right? We adopted it?
No.
No, we didn't.
Okay, he has a
I
record.
thought you didn't second it. You already seconded it, I thought.
It was seconded, but we didn't vote on it.
She still has to withdraw the motion.
Okay,
So,
I made the motion.
okay, so we'll wait on, okay. So you're withdrawing? Or do you want to vote on it?
I think there's two things. Number one is if there's a possibility that we could accept this amendment, but it would have to change some of the wording in the base, subject to rewording. So I don't know legislatively the best way to do it if we
Do you want to just wait until we get information?
I think
just,
my druthers would be to keep this legislation simple. It's focused on restaurants and the use of these in restaurants, and we have an entity, the county, that will inspect and notify us. When you're getting into these other issues, I think you're not in restaurants anymore.
yeah, buildings are
Um,
different.
So I'm not ill-disposed towards us addressing this. I just think we ought to try to keep the legislation as focused and simple as possible.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll put a motion to withdraw amendment number 5 for review
Okay.
or acceptance. Second.
All those we're essentially taking no action. I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to vote on it. So moving on to amendment number 6. I think this one also is for the law office. This is where I believe the Prince George's, and I think Baltimore City, I can't remember, but anyway, they had a provision where in case an establishment is not responsive to fines, the city attorney may take action in court. And so that's just, but it's kind of dependent on what the law office language, how they want that worded. Is this something that we want to send to the law office for information on? If they feel like they need to, if they feel like they don't need the provision, we don't need to put it in there, but I just saw it in the other jurisdictions' legislation. I don't know how we typically handle that.
I'm trying to figure out why we would go to law. I mean, why we need something. We have the enforcing body, which is the county inspectors, and we will do separate legislation for the fee or the fines. What is it that I'm not sure what this does.
This,
The Office of Law can always, and in fact, on I believe the county uses the same citation form that the city uses because it's a state citation form. And on the form, it has boxes you can check, and one of them is you must appear in court.
Right.
So,
Mayor be a part of the,
right, so we can
process.
always, if something we've done a few $1,000 fines, and they're still not responsive, then we can check that or ask that box to be checked that says you must appear in court. I don't think we've quite figured out how the notification from the county health inspectors to the city is going to work. Who does that go to? Does that go to the permit people in planning and zoning? And then they fill out their own citation form, which then all of these checking the boxes becomes relevant and appropriate. So I think the mechanics of this, I think, are a little, but in terms of action by the city against someone, in that universal state citation form, there is a box that can be checked off by the inspector, or anybody, I guess, that's issuing, authorized to issue, and then it would go to law automatically.
My concern with 7 is just that, are we going down a rabbit hole?
Before you get to
Oh,
7, we're still in 6.
6, I mean, exactly,
okay.
same thing,
That's what you're
the
on.
violation 6.
Okay.
Before we go down this rabbit hole, since the county's enforcing, I don't know if we should combine that in, address that in 3, because it addresses the whole enforcing category.
I think that's the part, I think that's,
kind of,
I'll make a note,
These are kinda
I'll
notes.
forward this question to the law office, because I think they'll have to provide some clarity on, well, that was his original, and I think, concern, oh, yeah, sure. Is your mic on?
Now it is. I spoke with code enforcement in the city, in the county, and they said they would do the inspections and notify us, but they would be notifying planning and zoning the code enforcement officer, John Manassa, currently.
Yeah, that's right.
And then if they ignore the citation, then they can issue, they have a procedure, they have a letter that they issue, they can increase the fine, there's different things they can do depending on what we decide here. But of course, as Alderman Arnett points out, the city attorney's office can always, once a citation has been ignored for a period of time, then they can bring an action to collect.
They can do what?
They can bring an action to collect or other action that is needed.
Okay.
I know I'm not supposed to give my legal opinion, but I
Thank
can't help it
you.
sometimes.
Well, you're all we have at the moment for legal,
All right.
okay, so so it sounds like it's already kind of set up in terms of, it's gonna go to Chief
Right.
Manassa, but I'd
Okay.
still like to hear what the law, I know the law office did have concerns about, how do we reference, or how do we tie this in with the Department of Health and the wording of that, so I guess we'll just have to wait till we, hear about that. So anyway, Amendment 7 was striking on page 2, line 20, striking city, replacing that with county, and the intention is to prevent businesses from going right outside city limits and packaging their food just so they can sell it in the city in the EPS containers. Any thoughts on that?
In for a penny or a pig, in for a poke. I mean, if we're gonna do this, why not change that to county?
I'm just trying to avoid any kind of future, way around it.
Right.
Because the county code prohibited, said anything that's packaged in the county has to
Right.
comply. But we have a small area, so I
Right.
wasn't sure if that would work. Do you have any thoughts, Alderwoman?
I guess there would be a question about what purview powers we have over things that go on in the county.
Well, in this case, it'd be, the health department would go to the businesses, and if they see food that's packaged in EPS foam, they would have to inquire about the origins and say, well, was this
Right.
packaged
But,
in
but
the county, then they wouldn't be able to do it. If it's packaged in Prince George's, they'd be able to sell it here,
But the county didn't pass their ordinance, so they're not gonna be, county inspectors aren't gonna be looking at that, right?
well, they'll be looking at this code anyway. So if they see if they see foam, they're gonna be looking at, basically telling them, well, you can't use this, but they'll also be looking at
Right.
the origin. I mean, because they also, I think that'd be easier for them to do than to simply keep it as city as well. Either case, they're gonna have to, but maybe that's more of a discussion we need to have with the health.
Well, probably with the
Well.
Office of Law too, because I'm not sure we can pass, regulations that affect the county.
Yeah.
So do you,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
I agree. I was trying to walk it through on how it affects, you know, like Grawls or something. But if you're, I think you're getting into county jurisdiction kind of confuses it.
My recommendation would to leave as much alone as we can.
Yeah.
Get it to the council, see what the vote is. All of these things can be refined with subsequent legislation, and may need a lot of refinements we don't even foresee, because we haven't had an implementation. So I guess keep it simple is still my watchword on these things, and that would be my I would leave 7 alone at this time, but I'm not,
Do you have a copy of it there?
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna, yeah, I'm not gonna fall on my sword on it either.
So could we at least clean, for lack of a better word, I don't know if that was it wasn't a motion. So could I just say, before we get it to the council, can we at least make sure that the law office looks at it to make sure it jives with the fact that this is a city and not a county? That, you know, at least make it make sense that at least a first pass on that, on the enforcing something that the county doesn't.
When is the
Yeah.
best time in the process to do that, Alderman?
Well,
would make
I mean,
sense.
the Office of Law is supposed to review these things before they let them out of the shop and get it to us, so
Yeah.
my presumption would be they looked at it the way it is. If we wanna change it to county, this would have to go back to the Office of Law for more review.
Mhm.
Has to.
Yeah,
Well, they didn't really comment on the original ordinance as it was written even, because they just came in with that overhaul.
okay,
You know, they struck the whole thing in reference to county code, so
right.
we don't really have a ruling from the law office on
Well, we
any of
should
it in that
probably,
regard.
I mean, one of the reasons the Office of Law is there is to keep us from doing things that are not lawful.
Well,
So, I mean, I don't know what your sense of urgency is on this, but we might be well served to recommend these changes and send it to the Office of Law first for review
Yeah.
before we send it on to the council.
I'm good with that. There's no urgency that I'm
Well,
aware of.
we still need the resolution for the fine, so maybe we can take advantage of this time to get the resolution in there to align with this legislation. They usually go hand in hand,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, Ross.
Usually
Yeah,
piggyback in
yeah.
some fashion, yeah.
They do usually go hand in hand.
All right, well, I'll mention, I'll ask them about Amendment 7, although we're not recommending it at this time.
Okay.
Sounds
Amendment
like
8
Amendment
does
8,
nothing for me. There is
yeah,
no
there is no
amendment.
amendment. Yeah, my
I thought you
typo,
were
so.
talking about 9, actually, because I'm going 9, I need help with 9.
So Amendment 8, this one would page 2, line 20 through 22 would strike, quote, or to materials used to package raw, uncooked, or butchered meat, fish, poultry, or seafood for off-premises consumption. So essentially, it's just a proposal to make sure that, for example, grocery stores can't sell meats on EPS foam.
But they do. But again, is is the focus of this on restaurant business or is it on all business?
Well, it's on food
Food service
services,
products.
so they are
Grocery stores are considered food
clearly in the
services.
definition that we have for
Because
the
they all
food
do, and I
services.
just cooked a steak that came on a slab of.
They do, and so the information I have on this is that, you know, for example, Whole Foods uses wax paper. Places like Wegmans uses plastic trays.
Giant does, I know.
Giant mixes, they have plastic and foam. Wegmans, I don't think uses foam anymore.
What about Growls?
Growls, I don't know. I don't have a survey on this either, but I do some information on it. So that's, see, my rationale is that there seems to be alternatives to using foam, especially the foam that if the meat comes on foam trays, you can't recycle that because it's contaminated. So it has to go in the trash. So if we use paper or plastic, that'd be less waste, but also potentially recyclable by residential pickup. So, but if you have any questions, this might be one we could open the floor if people have specific comments on this amendment. If you want more information on this amendment, since this wasn't part of the original
I'm
resolution. But do the committee members have any questions to start off?
Well, I'm doing on my Muni code, what the definition of a food handling service is.
Yeah, it's in the
Is it?
It's
Oh,
in the legislation. So food service business means a full service restaurant, limited service restaurant, fast food restaurant, cafe, delicatessen, coffee shop, supermarket, grocery store,
Oh.
commercial retailer, et cetera, food truck even.
And these are all
this is-
places that the county currently inspects.
Yeah, presumably, yeah. And this also is based on the language from other jurisdictions.
Yeah, okay.
So if they're currently inspecting it, why do we want to drop this clause, or materials used to package raw, uncooked, blah, blah, blah?
Well, because that's in there as an exemption.
Oh, you're
And I'd like
want
to get that included. It excludes the
okay, I got you.
meats, raw meats. And I'm not sure if that's what other jurisdictions specifically do on that. Well, that's another question we can ask the audience.
Okay.
Do you have any other?
No, let's reach out on
Should
that
we,
one.
all right, we'll reach out. Who wants to come up first? Anybody? You come on up. You can come up next.
Oh, sorry, Martha Ainsworth again from the Sierra Club. So in the Montgomery and Prince George's bills, these foam food trays under meat and raw fish are exempted from the ban. But frankly, there are as many substitutes for those trays as there are for any other tray, plastic and so forth. And a lot of stores are now using plastic that can be recycled at home.
Right.
So you would be the trailblazers on this, on eliminating the exemption. But vegetable trays, you know, sometimes they take ears of corn and stuff and put them on a tray in a store. Okay, those are included in the other counties' bans, but
Right.
just not the meat for some reason. I don't know how to explain it.
I guess I'm concerned about how enforceable, these are national grocery chains. Do they really, does Safeway, it used to be the days we'd say AMP, but Safeway modify how they're packaging their produce based on the local municipalities?
Well, look, of course, these trays, the meat and fish that's raw, they're done in the store, right?
Right.
They're packaged in the store, and they're not packaged outside. So
Well,
that's,
actually, all of Giant's meats are packaged in Landover.
No, some of them. Not
They come in from there.
Very few
right,
that,
right. So,
they're
so
shipped in.
this is one of the reasons why there is this exemption that happens to be in the store, and this is, you know, not, I don't know to what extent all the stuff in the chicken section is packaged outside or not. But the fact is that for this ban in general, there are many national chains that have products in EPS that now have substitutes, and they have substitutes for all of these things
Mhm.
in Montgomery, Prince George's, and DC. and they're in wide use.
Right.
Why not here in Annapolis too?
Sure.
You know, I just wanted to address that comment, although you're really interested in meat trays, I understand that. Anyway, I hope I answered your question.
Yep.
Thank you. Sir, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
stay there if you want.
kind of take a different view on that, in that there are always alternatives to the foam trays. I mean, clearly that they've been out there since day one. The reason the foam trays are used to begin with, whether they're shipped in from meat, seafood, or poultry, or packaged on site, is from a sanitation standpoint. There's less blood, there's less wrap, and that's why restaurants and grocery and supermarkets use them. She was correct in saying that you know, they are exempt in the Prince George's and Baltimore City as well. But I would take the position that again, the reason that, for instance, a local butcher might want to be able to package raw meat on there and have that exemption is it's really as much as a sanitation. The molded pulp and the compostable and the other substitutes, not from a recycling standpoint, not from any other standpoint, but from a use standpoint.
Right.
And one of the reasons that foam was used for, you know, for the meat trays coming in, as you mentioned, Landover and places like that, that packet was, they didn't want the blood and all that stuff in the cases. So foam has unique properties of sealing it, and that's one of the reasons it's done.
So you're saying the foam, can
Yep.
you do the same thing with plastic? You're saying the foam has better sealing capacity?
You can use clear plastic, which could be made from polystyrene or another plastic, or foam plastic. But as I say, the ability to, now I'm talking about the trays and
Okay.
seafood and stuff like that,
Yeah.
the ability to, they're all machine wrapped and everything like that, so
Right.
that process seals and keeps and minimizes the blood. They all have soaker pads under it. The alternate materials, when they say there's other substitutes, they don't have that same issue. In other words, you have, if you've ever seen kind of, it's molded pulp. I mean, you know, they're used in New York and places like that. They're not used as much because of the sanitation and the idea that nobody wants to see kind of blood and all that stuff kind of around the sides and everything. So again, foam lends itself to presenting the material and minimizing, you know, the blood and all that stuff. That's why it's used.
Okay, we got it.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's part of the preparation.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, I know at the Giant,
Yeah.
a lot of their, like Alderman said, is actually Landover, that's in what, PG?
Right.
Yeah, Prince
County.
George's.
So I mean, that would be exempt anyway. We don't have
Right.
jurisdiction over that, so they would still be able to, if they did ship. But I think in terms of what's being shipped, I've seen that in plastic, I've seen that,
Right.
actually, I don't know if I've seen that in foam, maybe they do that, but I know Purdue comes in plastic trays, that's
Yeah,
all
sure.
wrapped. But in terms of the stuff that's packaged in the store, that's what I think,
Well,
at least
that's what
my
I'm saying, yeah.
intention would be to,
Right.
what to focus on. And in terms of that, you know, I know Whole Foods uses wax paper
Right.
in store when you order meat. Giant, when you order meat in store, I'm trying to think if they use styrofoam or foam or plastic.
I just got a,
Oh, no, I didn't know they're good, they don't, they're good. What was the question?
no, Giant. I just got a center cut steak from the Giant,
Yep.
and they put it, as the gentleman said, on a little mat in a a plastic foam tray, and then wrap the saran wrap around it. So it's, you know, it must, at a minimum, be
The
mixed.
raw meats and fish and everything in a foam tray with a soaker pad minimizes the leakage and that. You don't get that from the other materials. You just don't get that same seal. That's what I'm saying. It's not that there aren't other materials.
right.
And again, from a sanitation standpoint and from a presentation standpoint, that's the main reasons for that being used as opposed to a takeout cup or something like that where you don't have those same,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah,
you're
because
dealing
right
with-
across the hall, right across the aisle, they have their prepared foods, where
Mhm.
I got the mac and cheese,
Right.
and that's on recycle. There's some alternate product, or it wasn't.
I mean, you can
styrofoam.
Well,
recycle the
it-
foam, but beside the recycling it really is a sanitation issues, and and it's one that the customers, whether it's the Giant, the Safeways and everything, kind of demand because they don't want the complaints about.
Well, if they all have to do it, then.
Right.
Right.
But, but I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that Wegmans phased out the foam for their packaged meat in the store, that they used the plastic or the paper.
I mean,
So it seems like it's doable. It may not be the most convenient.
it's
for
whether
the
you want to
stores.
legislate it, I guess.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well,
Is
I
there
have a
somebody
question.
from the commission who?
Yeah.
But I did, you started to develop the thesis that it's styrene, not polystyrene.
Right.
And I do want to hear more about that. I'm not a fan of doing legislation that's not enforceable, and I'm also not a fan of doing legislation that doesn't have good science behind it. And I think we'll have some other perspectives offered, but I did want to hear you out on what you wanted to tell us about
and
that.
I think that's a misperception, and there's a lot of information about the chemicals that go into making the product. And as I said before, styrene and ethylbenzene are two chemicals that make the polymer that makes eventually the product. There's a difference. We're not regulating styrene, the liquid. We're regulating a product made. And the amount of styrene in a finished product is very, very small to begin with. So what you've got here is, when you're, as I say, well, all of the different health agencies that have studied polystyrene, they require migration tests. For 50 years, FDA has required that you show when you use polystyrene, when you put it in, food contact and things like that, the amount that's in your diet and the amount that's actually put out there. What's the difference? Styrene is a naturally occurring material. It's actually in fruits and vegetables and cinnamon and beer. It's at higher levels there than it is in migrating out of a foam cup. That's the science, and I think that was the science that was presented, not only in the Anne Arundel County but others. And if you look at the basis for the veto, it was saying we've looked at both sides of this issue. We've looked at those scientific studies from those agencies. We've looked at the allegations that styrene leaches out and causes all kinds of problems as a chemical. But the bottom line is all your health agencies, your federal agencies, FDA for 50 years, there's never been any issue. They wouldn't approve food safety for polystyrene if there was a problem. So as I say, styrene is a chemical. It's regulated. Polystyrene in your food service products, there isn't a health effects issue. And
So that's the health effect,
Right.
and I'm sure the chair is going to let us
Yeah, no,
hear from everybody. I just wanted to pursue this a little bit more with you.
Sure.
Because it's not just the health effects, it's when this stuff gets through its primary use and then gets into the environment, gets behind the Conowingo Dam,
Yep.
and then in splushing up on our shores and that sort of thing. And actually, that's what I personally find much more objectionable about all of the polystyrene is it floats around, it breaks up into small pieces, it's ingested by our seafood, and then we ingest the seafood, and it gets into us, and
Well, we agree that, whether it's polystyrene or plastics, don't believe in the ocean. And the way we've approached that is we depend on the experts to try to prevent that stuff from getting out there from the litter. We're also, I know yesterday Alderman Tierney mentioned about New England. There's not a lot of research on what happens to plastics like polystyrene. There's theories about what happens on ingestion of things, and so the entire industry is working with the people in the know. We're working with the Woods Hole Oceanography to do a fate of plastics, and then locally here, we've been approached over the number of years. We funded a Port of Baltimore study with Trash Free Maryland. We've done litter prevention work with the City of Baltimore and the Mayor's office to try to get at solutions. But mark nobody wants to have plastics in the ocean, and we know that because plastics floats, it's very visible. So a lot of what we try to do is, we know that it's a prevention issue. Cleanups are great, but it doesn't need to get there in the first place. And then there's the whole issue of why can't you make it degradable? And as I say, degradable is kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, something that degrades gets into methane and leachates and landfills, and the fact that it doesn't degrade isn't necessarily a bad thing. But litter is a nuisance. We collect it. We know how much is out there. We obviously support the trash water wheels and full litter surveys, everything we can get at it. We do everything from putting lids on trash cans, trying to support programs. We're blowing litter. So
I want to thank you, sir, but
yeah.
I just want to again focus on the
Yep.
the
meat.
No,
grocery store.
I introduced
No, he asked
this.
the question.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
asked the question, and again, I want to make sure that our function as a committee is we get to go through these long drawn-out meetings so that we can inform our colleagues, and I want to make sure that we get all sides of this so that when we recommend the legislation to them, they can have trust that we've helped think it through. So that's why I wanted to pursue this line of questioning, but I think I've taken your point. These health effects of this, there may be some, but that's not huge. Maybe necessarily huge, but the trash effect of this is huge. And if we don't let businesses use it, that kind of eliminates it from becoming trash. So I think that's another rationale for this legislation.
Well, I'll just add one more thing, is that we've submitted in our testimony, cities have looked at what happens when you ban a certain product and substitute it, and if you don't get at the prevention. And San Francisco is a perfect example. They did ban polystyrene. They did it before and after litter. And what they found was after they banned polystyrene foam food service, item for item, the substitute materials were littered even more because they were heavier. And in the absence of programs like Keep America Beautiful and things like that, so substituting one material for another with a ban doesn't necessarily get the litter unless you really do all these other things. So.
All right, I'm going to cut it off there because
That's
we
fine.
are running out of time, and I don't want to have a back and forth because everybody
No.
from the public is not able to
Sure.
attend at 3 in the afternoon. But if you have specific
No.
questions, that's fine.
Yeah, no,
But I do want to hear these two, if I have brief comments about the meat trays. If you, is that what? Just state your name and who you're with.
My name is Claire Jordan, and I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Manager for Trash Free Maryland. We have been working on this type of legislation at the state level and in the jurisdictions in Maryland that already have a ban, along with Washington, D.C., and we have been also conferring with other jurisdictions across the country because there are currently over 115 bans nationwide. So I wouldn't call us an expert on EPS foam bans, but we have been working on this for quite some time. And like what you said, Alderman Savage, there are businesses and there are grocery stores that are using alternatives to EPS foam for packaging meat, and there aren't sanitation concerns with them. It's possible to do it. They put down additional materials on top of the plastic trays to keep things in place to prevent any sort of liquids or fluids moving around. And when you get meat on an EPS foam tray that has that padding on it, when you take that off, there is glue left over. So that tray goes to a landfill anyways. It's not going to go and be recycled at any of the DART recycling drop-off centers across the state. And it going to a landfill is not a positive aspect of this product. According to our governor's zero waste executive order, we need to reduce the number of landfills we have in the state, reduce the size of them over time. So our landfills have expiration dates. And what they're looking at now is what can be diverted from a landfill. So what can be recycled and what can be composted. EPS foam is never going to be able to be recycled or composted in the state of Maryland, as many studies have shown across the country that were included in our public testimony, so I won't go into any of that. So there is nothing that they can do with it but keep it in a landfill. So it doesn't help us achieve the zero waste executive order mandated by our governor, and it doesn't do anything positive for landfills. So even if we continue using the meat trays and you pull off the part of the tray that has the contaminants, it still has glue on it, and it isn't taken by the Crofton Recycling Drop-Off Center.
Okay. Any questions?
No,
Actually, you said it much better with more authority to me. I'm Rick Kissel, by the way, with the Anne Arundel County Sierra Club, the vice chair of that now. The only part I want to focus in on is really have to consider what happens to these products that have the exempted meat thing, because they go to homeowners, and the homeowners, you know, that tray goes into the trash and then goes into a landfill if it doesn't blow away someplace and get into the water supply, in which case it never gets recovered. Okay, even in the landfill, it's not going to deteriorate and decompose or anything. It's going to stay around. It's going to get into smaller and smaller pieces and become micro pieces. These things absorb all kinds of contaminants, that's whatever. You know, mercury, lead, whatever, everything, arsenic, they absorb whatever's around them. They absorb a lot of impurities. Okay, so those impurities kind of live longer, they stay around longer. And if you've ever been around a landfill, you know, they churn it up every now and then. And so these pieces of polystyrene are going to get flipped up, they're going to be blown away, they're going to get in the water. The little microballs that these things are full of, you know, they're going to float in the water. The fish are going to get those with all the contaminants, and we're going to eat the fish. I mean, it's just bad to have that stuff anyway. The way to stop it is now. You cannot clean it up once it gets in the water. I don't know how many water wheels you'd have to put out there to really clean it to any extent. And if the pieces are smaller than a pea, you're not going to get them anyway.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's it.
So what seems to be a consensus that I'm hearing is the health concerns, that's for scientists to tell us, but the further back we move in the chain of production to stop these things, the more likely it is we're going to keep it from getting into the water and so forth. So it is, I personally feel that the trash part of this is the bigger worry. And if we don't have people using it, then I don't see how it gets into the trash and into the environment. So that's...
Yeah. And I want to give my colleague a chance, Alderwoman Tierney, since you're on the health committee, did you have anything you want to say about the, you gave me time, so do you have anything you want to say about the health aspect? Because the Alderwoman, the chair focused on the health pretty strongly. And
Yeah, well, we were looking at the report from the county health department, and that was the basis for our review yesterday and our decision. And that was, as you said, and what was the more striking was the, not so much the prevalence of the in the water, but what sort of that exponential impact was to like the what word am I looking for? To the water, and to the whales and all that. So it was a no-brainer that we supported it from that perspective. How? Does that answer your question?
So we have a number of amendments that we've passed.
I do.
Well, so where do we stand on the meat? I mean, I'd still be in favor just because I feel like there's no alternative except to throw away the foam trays.
I agree. So we're talking about Amendment 8/9?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would move we
Yeah,
You can take that.
recommend favorably on this amendment as well.
Okay, so we're done with amendments?
No,
Do you want
this
to
is
second
doing
his
the
motion?
actual-
Yeah, okay, I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Amendment 8 gets favorable recommendation. Okay, and just to...
No, wait, yeah.
To Kia, do we need to do a whole new favorable recommendation for the ordinance again, or?
Yeah.
Actually, we just wait till we get the law office
What I
information.
think we do is recommend to the council that the legislation be accepted with the recommendations from this committee, for the amendments from this committee. So I would make that motion.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Do we want to wait until we get the law office, or you're saying?
Well, the ones that are going to the law office, we didn't do those amendments, like we didn't do Amendment 7.
I mean, do we have to wait to take final action on this until we get back?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so, because the ones that we passed, 1 through 4, and 9, are our recommendations for the council to consider as amendments to the legislation. The Office of Law is gonna have to be involved in some of these things when, at the same time, they're drafting the fee resolution. So I think
Yeah.
we can move this forward. I mean, we can wait as long as we want to, but I would, guess I'm kinda anxious to move this forward to the council.
I've been going, well, I asked Felicia the special event, so I just was asking her a question in reviewing this. I'd like to propose an amendment that we include special events. I mean, the food service that goes on during special events is quite prevalent, and I don't know if that's something separate, or is that muddy up the waters?
I think that would.
Is that,
I
I
think
mean, I was trying.
Food trucks are included.
So I was trying to get an answer from her. I didn't mean to be rude here, because she, you have like the Rotary Club event, and I don't know if that actually, I think I have the answer. Or maybe we could amend the special events legislation that they have to be in conformance with the da-da-da-da, and not muddy this one
Yeah.
up. Do you know my concern? I mean, that's a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of.
I understand
Like, look at
your
the boat
concern.
show,
Yeah.
those vendors at the boat show file a special events permit,
Right.
and then they're charities, and, I'm not worried about the Rotary Club, because that's green and Appomattox green.
So Alderman Lippman, on the special events,
Sorry, if folks want to talk, can you step outside? We're still deliberating in here.
Sorry, I just.
on the special events legislation, amended that to include that they had to do recycling and those sorts of
Sure,
things.
yeah.
So I kinda like the track you're taking where we address this through the special
Okay.
events legislation,
Okay.
that they also have to comply with this,
Okay, that's how we do it,
this,
good.
well, I mean, that's
We
a
could-
way to do it, I'm
I-
not saying that's the way, but
Yeah.
I think it could be done. I guess my overall desire is to keep this as simple
Yeah.
as possible,
Mhm.
keep it moving,
Mhm.
make the amendments, that we can make, that should be pretty clear to our colleagues, but maybe I'm just impatient.
No,
Well,
I just
that's a-
want for the record that we don't forget about special events, so,
Well,
we can,
we just make a.
we can,
We could just make an amendment and put special events, put it in under food service business.
Yep, good.
Put it after, because we have listed.
This could be Amendment 8.
I knew it all along.
Food service, vending truck or cart, food truck business or institutional cafeteria,
And vendors at special events.
including those operated on or behalf of city departments
Oh, okay, Alicia
Mm.
said.
and other businesses selling, providing food within the city. Would that be considered other business selling or providing food in the city for
Probably
consumption?
not by the staff, I think.
So we could put something like
I think,
including food,
So let me look at it.
including entities providing food at special events.
Right.
Or
Grocery
social-
stores, vending trucks.
What about the pop-up tents you have during boat show?
Right.
Or Rotary Club that sells
Well,
the,
in St. Mary's, that
Yeah.
sells over the fence.
they have to be
well, do they have to get inspected by the health department?
Well, here, that's the thing,
No, I think they are, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we just add something like, and vendors at special city special events.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would cover
okay. So
Oh, that would cover it, yeah,
and vendors,
yeah.
I'd say associated with,
Yeah, city special events.
Hi
with
Felicia,
city-
for the record, you said you have no clue, hi.
to cut your mic off. So the amendment number 8 then,
Right,
or actual, yeah, or 9,
would be
would be,
on line,
adding in,
page 2, let's put it on line 12, page 2.
Page 2's on
Food trucks, vendors at special events, comma, business or institutional cafeteria, kind of like this.
I kind of like the putting vendors associated with
Okay,
special events,
that's
just
fine.
because if there's someone
Right.
that's not at the boat show but outside it,
Right.
you know.
Right. Okay.
So, you got that, Takia? Okay, so
So it's-
it'd be, so right after it says food truck, comma, and then after food truck, it'd be comma, vendors associated with
city special
city
events.
special events. Or
And
should we just say
comma,
special events?
businesses or institutional cafeteria.
Yeah, are these only city sponsored events?
Well, that's a whole different.
And do we need to specify it?
What, city special
Is
events?
it just city, anything, does that mean anything in the city?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we're talking about all those things like boat shows and
Yeah.
bicycle things, you know, special event.
Festivals.
I have, you know, a special event for my birthday.
Yeah, right.
In my house.
No,
so
that's a good point, yeah. All right, so does anybody want to make a motion on that one then?
I did.
I did.
I second that motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye. Yay, thank
And
you.
so we can get out of here on time. I don't want to make Takia mad.
Oh,
I've made enough people mad this week.
no,
so,
that's all right.
So
I
we
guess
need a-
overall we'll make a,
Motion to recommend favorably on this legislation to city council with the amendments approved by the Environmental Matters Committee.
I'm not sh-
I'm not sure if you guys really needed to because you've already done it, and I'm only
Okay.
going by, I think it was in the rules committee where you had done it previously and then came back and did amendments, so I think you're good.
We did them
Okay.
as we went.
Right.
okay,
All right,
you're the boss.
multitasking.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, entertain motion to,
Move, we adjourn.
Fred? No.
Yeah.
I second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.